have now got massive platforms through Twitter for free. It's also the fact that it lets the light in. You know, it's why in North Korea they have to ban all criticism. It's why they're trying to shut down so many BBC people. It lets the light in. Twitter lets the light in. If you're existing on an unleavened diet of client journalism in the Sun or the Mail or the Telegraph, and you're somehow ignoring the fact they told you that Cameron was going to be brilliant, they told you that May was going to be brilliant, they told you that Johnson was going to be brilliant, now they're telling you that Truss is going to be brilliant. Anyone with a brain, anyone with an IQ in double figures is going to go, hang on a minute, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not taking another horse racing tip off you. The last three are still running. But anyway, stick your life savings on this one. Stick your life savings on Truss in 4:10 at Cheltenham. He said, well, you're the bloke who told me to put my life savings on Cameron and on Johnson and on May. Why on earth would I take your advice about putting my life savings? Twitter lets the light in, and that's why they can't cope with it. God, this trivial little website, funny little place where I used to go for cat videos. It's now terrifying the most powerful people in the country, whether it's politicians or press barons. Or silly Steve Bryan. Last word on this to Ben, who's in Brighton, and then I shall summon the Usherwood now because PMQs is on the way. Summon the Usherwood. Okay, see this little pitter-patter of tiny trainers coming down the stairs. Ben's in Brighton. Probably the last word on this because I think it's pretty obvious, and we've all agreed, Ben. Are you going to throw a spanner in the works?
I don't think so. I think he's white, he's working class. He's a self-made man in only the way a sportsman can be.
Yeah.
He should, in every sense, be... I mean, he is, to use that awful tabloid expression, a national treasure, and yet he's not towing the line. He's doing something different, and they are deeply, deeply, deeply scared of him. I think they're scared of him.
I do too. I mean, he's such a mild-mannered fella. He'd never got a yellow card in all his footballing career, and yet they're terrified of him. You'd think they'd be frightened of Vinnie Jones, wouldn't you? But no, it's Gary Lineker. Gary Lineker has become the bête noire of right-wing politicians. He's tweeted in the last 7 minutes, it's funny how those who shout the loudest for freedom of speech are so often the first to demand that you shut up when they disagree with your opinion.
That's a very good point. That's a brilliant point.
He shouldn't be tweeting. We're not paying him to tweet that sort of stuff, says silly Steve Bryan, who also tweets about football. It is pretty obvious when all is said and done that it is just fear.
It's fear, yeah.
Fear of dissenting voices.
Yeah, and I think as they get worse, the fear will get worse.
And he's the snowflake, remember? We're the snowflakes.
yeah, totally. Yeah, we're the snowflakes. Yeah, we're the snowflakes.
Ben, mind how you go. The people who are terrified of Gary Lineker's Twitter account are the thick-skinned ones, and those of us who don't like sewage being pumped into our seas in order to keep profits enormous at water companies sold by a Conservative government, we're the snowflakes, we're the thin-skinned ones. Now, after PMQs, I'm minded to do some post-match analysis in which I will play the role of Gary Lineker. But I'm going to give you a heads up on it because it's Liz Truss's very first one. So after 12:30, I'll level with you, all right? I was thinking we'll keep a few of these Lineker calls in reserve in case no one's really that faffed about talking about PMQs at half, which happens sometimes. That 12:30 to 1 o'clock on a Wednesday during parliamentary sitting can be a little bit tricky. But I think there's only one answer to the question. And unlike some people who do this for a living, I don't enjoy phone-ins where everyone's saying the same thing. So we can't go back to this, can we? Which means we are going to have to do a bit of post-match analysis. So pay attention to PMQs, which is due to start in 5 minutes or so, because after it's finished, I'm going to ask you what you thought of Liz Truss's debut at PMQs, all right? Pay attention. I'm going to ask you at 12:30 what you thought of Liz Truss's debut at PMQs and, of course, Keir Starmer's performance. Theo is here.
Should we do some predictions? Some pre-match predictions.
Go on, then.
Unfavourable or unfashionable opinion, I think it's going to be quite a difficult one for Keir Starmer.
Go on.
Because you can expect the Tory benches to at least want to project a united front around Liz Truss. It's the strongest she's going to be in the House of Commons right now, looking ahead, because, of course, every policy from now on is going to cause potentially consternation, disappointment. Well, you said you wouldn't do that, disillusionment potentially. And that's why I think she's at her strongest right now. And she will inevitably end up disappointing members of Parliament, her own side, with whatever she comes up with, and that's the potential.
So why is that going to be hard for Go? Just because
it's
today,
going to go down. Today is going to be hard.
Yeah.
Now that's not to say that the policy she comes up with, the energy policy we're expecting tomorrow, won't be popular in the rest of the country. That people won't say actually it's the right thing to do, but because you've got this fracture between those Conservatives who actually didn't really ever embrace Boris Johnson's high tax, high spend policies, things around furlough, for example. If she goes down that same route, that she's going to be unpopular on the one side. But on the other hand, if she comes up with a policy...
Are you sure? Is it not easier to argue that we have to help people?
£130 billion,
but it's not. They're not going to be popular
with some of their MPs.
No, I understand what you're saying, but you can be opposed to some public spending and in favour of some other public spending. Just because you thought too much was spent on furlough doesn't necessarily mean you'd be opposed to spending a lot on energy.
So she's going to spend £130 billion.
Yes, I know.
Where's that on subsidising energy? And she said she won't come up with that extra cash from a windfall tax on the energy companies. No. She's been explicit about that.
So they wouldn't like that either, would they?
So then you're left with
you'd almost feel sorry for her if she hadn't been so desperate to get her hands on the prize.
There's a choice where you load it onto future bills running 10, 15 years down the line. That was Rishi Sunak's, essentially Rishi Sunak's policy, which he said was a discount, but then everybody turned around and said was a loan. That was very unpopular. Or you could end up borrowing more money, which isn't necessarily the fiscally prudent thing to do, and that will draw criticism from her own side. Or is she going to abandon those £37 billion worth of tax cuts that she promised? So it's a very difficult situation for her going forward.
But today it'll just be cheer.
Exactly.
Cheer.
But it's going to be very difficult for her to thread that needle. And I'm not necessarily trying to cast aspersions or criticise whether it will be popular in the country.
No,
I'm saying she's going to disappoint her own side. And that's why today I think is going to be the most difficult one looking ahead for Keir Starmer.
What do you think Keir Starmer will go in on?
I think he's going to do more of what he did at the end of, but with all the added extra bonus content from the summer leadership campaign, of all the criticisms you had from people like Michael Gove.
So he's just going to repeat. You think we'll get a lot of repetition of what people on her own benches have said about her and
over the course of this summer? Because you have to remember, this is the first time Parliament has said this is sitting since the majority of the campaign. I think there were 12 or so hustings over the course of the summer recess where so much has been said, and that material hasn't been used on the floor of the House of Commons. There was a bit at the beginning when you had the candidates going up against each other in the TV leadership debates, but we haven't had. There's all of that collected material from the summer where Rishi Sunak was very disparaging about Liz Truss's economic policy. As I said, Michael Gove and others waded in as well. And that creates an opportunity.
We will, of course, be crossing live the moment that Keir Starmer gets to his feet for the first PMQs for Liz Truss as Prime Minister. We haven't talked much about the Cabinet. Should we save that till after?
We've got a couple of minutes, I think. There'll be a couple of
let's save it till after in case no one rings in to tell me what they thought about Liz Truss.
Everybody will ring.
Don't be so. You can never take that for granted, Theo. You know, one day you've not read your David.
Does it keep you awake at night?
Just because all crows are black doesn't mean the next crow you see will definitely be black. It's philosophy, that.
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay. So we're talking about the Cabinet. We're saving the Cabinet.
Let's save the Cabinet.
Okay, let's
like
talk
roast
about
potatoes at Sunday lunch.
Let's talk
save
about
it till last when they're all nice and gravy sodden.
I would imagine if you're talking about topics that Keir Starmer is going to go in,
yes.
I think he's got to go in on the cost of living. He's got to go in on energy bills. He's got to go in on the fact that...
Anything left field?
No.
Ian Dunt's on form, as usual. He says, make the most of this moment. It'll likely be the only time we approach a Starmer Truss PMQs with anything approaching excitement.
I disagree with Ian Dunt.
I know you do.
I always
love it. You love it, don't you?
But also, people love it. I think. I mean, if you're listening now, you look forward to PMQ every week.
It's the bants between you and me they enjoy. I don't know if it is. People are always asking me to do more of the Graham Norton type commentary over the top of it, but I can't because I don't think Liz Truss is going to lie as easily, as frequently, or as completely as Keir Starmer, as Boris Johnson used to do. Let's go now, because she's on her feet. Here's your new Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
And to take on responsibility at a vital time for our country. I am determined to deliver for everybody across our United Kingdom. I will work constructively with all members of this House to tackle the challenges we face. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the Prime Minister to her place? It's her first PMQ and it's also mine. In a leaked audio tape, the Prime Minister is heard saying that British workers need to put in more graft and that they are lacking in skill and application. She also wants to take away their basic workers' rights. In my Erdington constituency, the latest figures from the Commons Library show
Paulette Hamilton, the new Labour
children,
MP who was
over
elected after the death of Jack Droman.
7,000 households are living in child poverty, and that 68% of those households have working parents. So does the Prime Minister believe that thousands of working parents on low income in my community should just put in more graft?
Well, I congratulate the Honourable Lady on her first Prime Minister's question. And what I am determined to do as Prime Minister is to make sure we have an economy with high wages and high-skilled jobs. And the way I will achieve that is through reducing taxes on people across our country and boosting economic growth. That is the way that we will make sure we get the investment and the jobs that people deserve.
I want to warmly congratulate my right honourable friend on becoming the third woman Prime Minister. And I want to ask her about pubs today. A pub restaurant in my constituency in Barnet got in touch with me to say they were struggling to find an energy supplier. And the quotes they had got hold of showed that they would be paying a 600% increase in their bill to £320,000. They can't survive that. Will she ensure her plan to tackle the energy price crisis helps businesses in the hospitality sector, which our communities value so much?
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. The hospitality industry is vital, and I will make sure in our energy plan that will help support businesses and people with the immediate price crisis, as well as making sure there are long-term supplies available, will help businesses as well as helping individual households.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on her appointment? When she said in her leadership campaign that she was against windfall taxes, did she mean it?
Very good.
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his welcome. I hope that we will be able to work together, particularly on areas we agree on. And I know that we have had strong support from the opposition in opposing Vladimir Putin's appalling war in Ukraine. And I want us to continue to stand up to that appalling Russian aggression that has led to the energy crisis we face now. I am against a windfall tax. I believe it is the wrong thing to be putting companies off investing in the United Kingdom just when we need to be growing the economy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for that answer. I ask because the Treasury estimates are that the energy producers will make £170 billion in excess profits over the next 2 years. The Prime Minister knows she's no choice but to back an energy price freeze. But it won't be cheap, and the real choice, the political choice, is who is going to pay. Is she really telling us that she's going to leave these vast excess profits on the table and make working people foot the bill for decades to come?
Well, I understand that people across our country are struggling with the cost of living and they're struggling with their energy bills. And that is why I, as Prime Minister, will take immediate action to help people with the cost of their energy bills. And I will be making an announcement to this House on that tomorrow and giving people certainty to make sure that they are able to get through this winter and be able to have the energy supplies and be able to afford it. But we can't just deal with today's problem. We can't just put a sticking plaster on it. What we need to do is increase our energy supplies long term. And that is why we will open up more supply in the North Sea, which the honourable gentleman has opposed. That is why we will build more nuclear power stations, which the Labour Party didn't do when they were in office. And that is why we will get on with delivering the supply as well as helping people through the winter.
But I look forward to tomorrow's statement, but the money's got to come from somewhere. And she knows that every single pound in excess profits she chooses not to tax is an extra pound on borrowing that working people will be forced to pay back for decades to come. More borrowing than is needed. That's the true cost of her choice to protect oil and gas profits, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that this country will not be able to tax its way to growth. The way we will grow our economy is by attracting investment, keeping taxes low, delivering the reforms to build projects quicker. That is the way that we will create jobs and opportunities across our country.
Here's Starmer.
So, Mr. Speaker, her first act as Prime Minister is to borrow more than is needed because she won't touch excess oil and gas profits. On that topic, how much would her planned corporation tax cut hand out to companies?
The right honourable gentleman is looking at this in the wrong way. The last time we cut corporation tax, we attracted more revenue into the exchequer because more companies wanted to base themselves in Britain, more companies wanted to invest in our country. And if taxes are put up and raised to the same level as France, which is what the current proposal is, and which I will change as Prime Minister, that will put off investors, it'll put off those companies investing in our economy, and ultimately that will mean fewer jobs, less growth and less opportunities across our country.
Mr. Speaker, it's extraordinary that not only is the Prime Minister refusing to extend the windfall tax, she's also choosing to hand the water companies polluting our beaches a tax cut. She's choosing to hand the banks a tax cut. She's choosing to hand the banks a tax cut. Add it all together, and companies that are already doing well are getting a £17 billion tax cut. While working people pay for the cost of living crisis, stroke victims wait an hour for an ambulance, and criminals walk the streets with impunity. Families and public services need every penny they can get. How on earth does she think that now is the right time to protect Shell's profits and give Amazon a tax break?
I'm on the side of people who work hard and do the right thing. That is why we will reverse the national insurance increase, and that is why we will keep corporation tax low. Because ultimately, we want investment right across our country. We want new jobs and new opportunities. And that is what I will deliver as Prime Minister.
Here's Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims to be breaking orthodoxy. But the reality is she's reheating George Osborne's failed corporation tax plans, protecting oil and gas profits and forcing working people to pay the bill. She's the fourth Tory Prime Minister in 6 years. The face at the top may change, but the story remains the same. There is nothing new about the Tory fantasy of trickle-down economics. Nothing new about this Tory Prime Minister who nodded through every single decision that got us into this mess and now says how terrible it is. And can't she see there's nothing new about a Tory Prime Minister who, when asked who pays, says it's you, the working people of Britain.
Well, there's nothing new about a Labour leader who is calling for more tax rises. Tax and spend. What I'm about is about reducing taxes, getting our economy growing, getting investment, getting new jobs for people right across the country. I'm afraid to say the right honourable gentleman doesn't understand aspiration. He doesn't understand opportunity. He doesn't understand that people want to keep more of their own money. And that is what I will deliver as Prime Minister. I will take immediate action to help people with their energy bills, but also secure our long-term energy supply. I will take immediate action to make sure we have lower taxes and we grow the economy. And that way, I will ensure we have a positive future for our country and we get Britain moving.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And firstly, can I congratulate my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for a successful campaign to become our party leader and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, it is right and proper that the government focuses its attention on rising energy costs for households across the country. But as we've heard, businesses big and small are exposed to horrific energy price increases, with no restraint provided by the domestic energy price cap and no support from government so far. For the sake of businesses in West Cornwall and on Scilly, the jobs they provide and the economy as a whole, what can my friend, the Right Honourable Prime Minister, do to ease the energy costs facing our businesses?
Well, my honourable friend is right. We do need to address the issues businesses face, and the package that we will be announcing tomorrow will do just that.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure the thoughts and prayers of everyone in this House will be with the families that were caught up in the terrible shooting over recess in Kyle and McCalsh, and indeed in Liverpool as well, and we trust that the families will be fully supported. Mr. Speaker, let me congratulate the Prime Minister and her family on her appointment. But I'm sorry to say that her reputation for straight talking has fallen apart at the first PMQs. After 9 questions, she's still not told us who will pay for her energy plan. Prime Minister, today the public are waiting to find out the response to the economic crisis, and they want answers. So, will the Prime Minister finally answer 2 very simple questions? Will she freeze energy prices at their current levels, and will it be paid for by a windfall tax? Yes or no?
Well, no, it won't be paid for by a windfall tax. I don't believe we can tax our way to growth. And what I want to see is us using more of our UK energy supply, including more oil and gas from the North Sea and nuclear power in Scotland as well. And I hope I can count on the SNP's support for that.
Ian Blackford.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say that on her first full day as Prime Minister, she has failed to rule out.
Shh, let's hear the next question. Ian Blackford.
The Prime Minister may have changed, Mr. Speaker, but it's the same old being shouted down by the Tories. On her first full day as Prime Minister, she's failed to rule out a Truss tax on household and businesses, instead of targeting the profits of massive corporations with a windfall tax. The Prime Minister planned appears to be a decade-long raid on the bank accounts of ordinary taxpayers. These costs must not be passed on to consumers and businesses by deferring bills. Government must announce an enhanced windfall profits tax, making sure that those oil and gas producers pay their fair share from excess profits. Does the Prime Minister understand that her first act as Prime Minister will now define her? A Truss tax that household and businesses will be paying for years to come.
Well, I'm not quite sure what the right honourable gentleman's position is, because on one hand, he doesn't seem to want oil and gas extraction from the North Sea, and on the other hand, he wants them to pay more taxes. Why does he make up his mind?
Chris Lauder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also warmly welcome my right honourable friend to her seat as Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Scottish Power, Bulb and E.ON, just three of many energy suppliers that say they provide 100% renewable electricity. Yet constituents of mine in West Dorset are baffled that the energy regulator allows those prices to rise on par with oil and gas. Would my right honourable friend confirm that she is on the side of the consumer in her energy policy that we'll hear from tomorrow?
Well, I certainly am on the side of consumer, and we need to make sure that we deal with all of the issues in the energy market and the way that energy is regulated. And I will certainly be saying more about this tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister should know by now that many people in the north of Ireland are starving and freezing in their homes. We need a tailored solution for Northern Ireland, but that's much harder to achieve because the DUP are refusing to form a government at Stormont. The new Prime Minister has a choice to make. She can either be on the side of the DUP or on the side of struggling people in Northern Ireland. So whose side is she on?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to work with all of the parties in Northern Ireland to get the Executive and the Assembly back up and running so we can collectively deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. But in order to do that, we do need to fix the issues of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which has damaged the balance between the communities in Northern Ireland. I'm determined to get on with doing that, and I'm determined to work with all parties to find that resolution.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I congratulate my right honourable friend and welcome her to her position as the third female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Can I ask my right honourable friend, why does she think it is that all three female Prime Ministers have been Conservative?
I thank my right honourable friend for her fantastic question. I look forward to calling on her advice from her time in office as I start my work as Prime Minister. It is quite extraordinary, isn't it, that there doesn't seem to be the ability in the Labour Party to find a female leader, or indeed a leader who doesn't come from North London. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the issue is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also congratulate the Prime Minister on her appointment? Mr. Speaker, inflation is at a 40-year high. The NHS is on its knees with 6.6 million people waiting for treatment. Thousands of victims of sexual offences and violent crime are waiting for justice. Not to mention passport delays, a summer of chaos in our airports and our beaches covered in sewage. The Prime Minister has served in every one of the Conservative governments responsible for this mess. So why should the British public trust her to clean up the mess that she's helped create?
I'm determined that we deal with the issues facing us as a nation. We do have problems with our energy supply due to the appalling war being perpetrated by Putin in Ukraine. That is why I will take immediate action to deal with the energy crisis. My Chancellor will take immediate action to reduce taxes and make sure we are growing our economy. And our new Health Secretary, who is also the Deputy Prime Minister, will be taking immediate action to make sure people are able to get appointments with their GP and proper NHS services.
Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
All sides of the House should wish to help the Prime Minister be successful in tackling the problems facing the country. When I raised one of them with the former Prime Minister in July, he said I could talk to the Housing Minister, but the Housing Minister retired after 17 minutes of hearing that.
Can I ask the Prime Minister to look to see why the Planning Inspectorate are able to overturn Council's planned protections for green lungs, and will she look at what's happening to the Goring Gap, the A259 in Worthing West and in South Downs constituency, because local councils have no role if they can't protect what matters most to them.
Well, I am a bit concerned.
There's always a slight risk when I take the decision to withdraw from PMQs that something exciting will happen imminently, but given that nothing exciting has happened so far, I think that was probably a fairly safe bet. Theo Ushwood, LBC's inimitable political editor, is still with me. I mean, there's one takeaway here, isn't there?
Which is?
The energy firms get to keep £170 billion of profit.
So we now have the clear dividing lines. The argument...
Just one other thing as well. Keir Starmer was born in Southwark and he grew up in Oxted in Surrey. So this line about North London, although it gets a cheer from the sort of nodding dogs on the back benches, is the first thing she said, to the best of my knowledge, that is demonstrably untrue, picking up, of course, where Boris Johnson left off. Boris Johnson was married to an Islington lawyer, while Keir Starmer was accused of being one despite not living in Islington. Carry on.
So we have clear dividing lines. So whereas previously there might have been an argument, or you might have expected there to be an argument about whether people should be given support with their energy bills, that's gone. The argument now is who pays for it and how is it funded. So the options are, from Liz Truss's point of view, she introduces a windfall tax on the energy companies. Labour has said that it will backdate the windfall tax from May of this year to January of this year. And then it's also calculated that because of reduced inflation, the amount of money we're paying back in terms of borrowing, what we borrow, is going to be less. And that, going by those sums, they think they've come up with around £29 billion, which means that voters don't have to pay for it through higher taxes. The other option is that we pay for these increase for a discount on our energy bills. The energy bills can be frozen, and that's done by loading up bills further down the line. So the anticipation is at the moment that energy bills will start to come down sometime in 2024. That's if things go to plan. Those are the estimates, and Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, has already laid that out. When the energy bills come down, actually they will remain higher than they would otherwise have been, because there will be some type of surcharge which we pay additionally for the fact that we haven't had sky-high bills now matching the energy price cap, which is talking about going up to £6,000 a year next April, £3,500 we know it's going to hit in October. That's another option. The other option is that we borrow the money. The government borrows the money. It goes to the markets and says, well, actually, we need to come up with £100 billion to cover the next 18 months, £129 billion to cover the next 18 months in terms of support. But that means that money is going to have to be paid back. And Keir Starmer's making the point that actually that's going to be our children, our grandchildren who are paying that back through their taxes. And it's worth reiterating we're paying around £83 billion during the course of this year in interest payments alone on what the government has borrowed in order to get us through the pandemic in terms of furlough.
What did you think about it, generally? Just overview. I mean,
she's gone to the right.
No, I meant the whole shebang. No, I mean, we knew roughly that she'd come out with that stuff. She was highly unlikely to do a massive U-turn on windfall taxes, albeit that she's arguably.
She said she was against. I just wonder whether she's done a bit of a Boris Johnson though with this one, because she said she was against windfall taxes. She said she didn't like windfall taxes. She did not say categorically she would not introduce a windfall tax.
Really?
She said no. She said she was against windfall taxes, and
she went on about how it would disincentivise businesses from investing here, despite one energy boss saying a windfall tax wouldn't actually.
No, that was the boss of BP saying they'd already made the decisions for this year.
Yeah, so a windfall tax wouldn't affect their investment at all. So that's a bit Johnson-y.
But
I know what you're doing, but I don't think she was leaving much wiggle room for.
Well, there's I'm not saying there's a huge amount of wiggle room. I'm just saying that politically it's going to be very difficult. The Tory benches might have been cheering.
Yes.
But when people find out how much money they've got to pay back on in their energy bills in 5-10 years' time, and how much demonstrably higher their energy bills are because actually she's decided not to introduce a windfall tax on £170 billion worth of profits, having previously worked for Shell, then actually politically she may find that she has to change position because it becomes so toxic with voters.
And she's appointed an economics advisor who previously used to work for the Taxpayers Alliance, who continue to refuse to reveal who actually pays their wages. But there are some suspicions that it involves vested interests in the arena of fossil fuels and elsewhere. Go on.
But Boris Johnson realised, and Rishi Sunak realised, how toxic this would be with voters. That's why they went for the windfall tax. They didn't want to go for the windfall tax, but there was always this element to Boris Johnson. People wanted to portray him necessarily as being right-wing. But actually, economically, he was centre, quite left-wing. Furlough is a classic example of that, and it was the same with the windfall tax. He didn't want to do it, but he recognised politically that in order to maintain his support in red wall seats in the north of England, Labour strongholds, he had to move on this issue, and he had to be practical about it. Liz Truss, and this is the difference, James, is taking a very different approach, what has been said. And will it cost her politically?
Yeah. I mean, how much of her energy is dedicated to avoiding rebellion, do you think, now? Avoiding trouble? Because Chris Bryant's tweeted, and I mean, there's an element of he would say that, wouldn't he? He's tweeted that they might be cheering, but they are all already getting the knives out in the little cliques around Parliament. But very low level of support among Tory MPs at the beginning of the leadership contest. There are very, very
in the
few
very
people.
final round. It was in the final round, the final of 5 rounds, that she actually got the requisite number of MPs. And Penny Mordaunt ran her very close in that contest when it was just getting down to the final 2.
So how conscious will she be of that? I mean, because it's very. I mean, what does red meat look like to the current?
That was
that's
red
what
meat.
she was doing.
That was red meat. That you heard the cheers of more. There were two
But
lines.
they'd have cheered her if she'd read out a shopping list.
No,
today,
but they liked that line, didn't they? When she came back on, there's nothing new about a Labour Prime Minister who wants to higher taxes, raising taxes. But those are taxes. Actually, the Tory government, the Conservative government, was going to put up taxes on national insurance. The taxes are not. They're not coming down from. We had the highest tax burden since the Second World War.
Yeah, she's only bringing it back
to par by not going ahead with this national insurance rise.
Exactly that. It is Ian Birrell, a journalist I rather like, who says this may be an unfashionable view, but I thought that was a better PMQs between the Tory and Labour leaders than we've suffered for a long time, with clear ideological difference and focus on policy disagreement. Certainly a relief after Johnson's boosterish, and then he uses a word I don't think I'm allowed to say on the radio, and I'm not going to test it to find out.
Okay. I think that's very good analysis.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Because I think
it's not so good for us.
No,
in a way.
Well, he's doing our job.
What?
Get Ian Birrell in instead.
No, I didn't mean that. I mean we quite like the fireworks and the nonsense. I mean it gives us something to get our teeth into, whereas that was a more grown-up exchange, perhaps.
Yeah. But it also offers, maybe, I don't know, maybe it'll be up to your callers after 12:30, James, but it offers, there's a clear ideological difference. And it's right to say that Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson were always trying to go after the same core group of voters, Labour voters who voted Conservative in 2019, and they were always fighting over the same patch of ground. And going by what Liz Truss has just said, actually now we're starting to see a parting of the clear blue water between Keir Starmer on the one hand and Liz Truss on the other side, with low tax, low spend, more quote unquote traditionally libertarian conservative policies, economic policies, and Keir Starmer on the other. And what's interesting about that is Liz Truss is moving away from the economic policies and approach that delivered Boris Johnson his majority of 80 seats back in 2019.
Yes.
Keir Starmer now has from going by that head-to-head, has a much clearer field of play in order to make his pitch back to those voters without feeling that Liz Truss is somehow trying to encroach or indeed owns that territory politically or demographically with the country. She's moving away from that and giving Keir Starmer the space. Can he make the most of it? Can he actually win back those voters? Are we going to see the Tories plummet in the polls as people say, hang on a moment, I don't really want to be paying sky-high bills till 2030. Thank you very much.
No, to plug the gap, we shall find out. You should probably stick around to talk us through the new cabinet, because it is, it's going to be there for a couple of years, isn't it? Minimum. That's well, we presume it is, although some people are already placing bets on Truss not making it to a general election. It is 12:30. Tim Humphrey is here now with your headlines. 12:33 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Much as I love Theo Usherwood, like a brother, in fact, I am interested in hearing what you made of all that malarkey down at the old PMQs. So give me a buzz on 0345 60 60 973. We'll take the two angles. What did you make of PMQs? I mean, do you, like Ian Birrell, a very esteemed foreign correspondent, feel actually slightly encouraged by the fact that it was a more grown-up exchange, shall we say, a little bit more substantive, proper points of difference on ideology, no bilge about Jimmy Savile or the fastest rollout in the West or whatever it was that Johnson was bloviating about last time we heard from him. Or not. 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Maybe, I don't know, a little bit on whether or not, or what you think of Truss per se. What your thoughts on Truss's premiership? Liz Truss is Prime Minister. I say Liz Truss is Prime Minister. You say what? 0345 6060 973. So a little bit of post-match analysis for today's PMQs and a little bit of Liz Truss is Prime Minister. It fills me with dread, optimism, joy, horror, whatever it is. And I'll take whatever you've got on this. Not just because I have to. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. While you're getting your phones out and calling me in your droves, Theo Usherwood will talk us through the new cabinet, just in case you rely entirely on this programme for your news and current affairs. And I'll tell you what, you could do far worse. Go on.
Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, early backer of Liz Truss's campaign. He was there at the very beginning with the...
co-author of that infernal book about how lazy we all are.
Neighbour of Liz Truss when they lived down in Greenwich, Therese Coffey, the Deputy Prime Minister, Health Secretary, very close friend of Liz Truss.
I didn't know that. Did you know that before?
Yeah, I did know that. I did a story about that.
Did you?
Yes, we did a story about, earlier in the year, Liz Truss threw a 50th birthday for Therese Coffey at her when she was Foreign Secretary, country residence, the Grace and Favour country residence cheapening. And as a result of throwing the birthday party, Liz Truss contracted COVID and couldn't go to an important meeting when it came to Ukraine just before the war. Russia invaded Ukraine. Suella Braverman, this is an interesting one because Suella Braverman managed to, very early on, gain a lot of the right-wing ERG.
Did, didn't she? Surprisingly.
She moved very quickly, and Liz Truss never wanted to be seen to be the one who wielded the knife against Boris Johnson, decided to continue with her trip as Foreign Secretary to the Far East rather than return to the UK when the Johnson government was collapsing. That enabled Suella Braverman to quite quickly hoover up a number of ERG members of the Conservative Party. But what was interesting about what Suella Braverman did very quickly after dropping out of the contest in the second round was actually turn around and say, now let's back Liz Truss. And that was super helpful for Liz Truss in terms of getting through to the final two. Had Suella Braverman perhaps gone the other way and urged her supporters to back Penny Mordaunt, it might have turned out differently. Ben Wallace, of course, got to keep his job as Defence Secretary. He was it was down to the membership, very popular with the membership. His support for Liz Truss was helpful, very helpful when it was going to go. It could go one of two ways against Rishi Sunak in the early days of voting during the contest. Ben Wallace backing Liz Truss was seen as a really helpful thing for her. Kemi Badenoch, I think, is going to be disappointed with her position as international. Well, we know she's disappointed with her position as International Trade Secretary.
How do we know?
Because she was hoping to be Education Secretary.
Right.
She was 21 minutes late, apparently, for the first cabinet meeting this morning. She had a face like thunder when she walked out.
Is that
very,
right?
very unhappy.
Gosh.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's a bit cheeky, isn't it?
She didn't. She was hoping for Education Secretary. That's actually gone to Kit Malthouse, who was very guarded about who he was supporting.
Kit Malthouse is Secretary of State for Education.
Yes, I got that correct. Yeah, let me just.
Oh, man alive.
Why?
Well, I met him. He's not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Right.
But then again, you're picking from a very depleted team sheet, aren't you, Liz? Hey, crikey.
But what's...
Backwash, I think, was the phrase that very right-wing bloke on the BBC on Sunday used. Go on.
So, and then Tom Tugendhat, he's got a job as Security Minister. He'll also be able to attend Cabinet. He was surprising when, having said for weeks that the country needed a clean break, I think was his phrase. He suddenly came on board with Liz Truss. Of course, Liz Truss had been Foreign Secretary and part of every government going back to the Cameron era. So
let's talk a bit about Tom Tugendhat because
he's got a job for his pivot.
But yes, he has. He's been rewarded for his pivot. But if he has ambitions, and we know he does, because he was the first person to announce that he would be prepared to run for the leadership, either against or post Boris Johnson. however effective an operator he is on select committees, and he really is an effective operator, he's done some amazing work, probably the most productive Conservative of the last few years. If he wants to run for the big job, he really does need to have some cabinet experience, doesn't he? And Truss clearly doesn't consider him to be a threat, a clear and present threat, for fairly obvious reasons, in that he speaks to a part of the party that's been almost obliterated in the last 3 years.
Yes, that's a fair analysis, that he recognised, he tried to use his lack of cabinet experience as a way of making that departure from the Johnson era, but ultimately he just didn't have that following within the parliamentary party for his campaign to get ahead of any steam. He got down to the final 5, if I remember correctly. But what's interesting is there's no room at the inn. I'm talking about the reason I'm mentioning Tom Tugendhat, the reason I'm mentioning Suella Braverman, Penny Mordaunt disappointed to get Leader of the House of Commons.
How do you know?
Did you see a picture? Did you see a picture?
Listen, I am cursed with a face that sometimes looks grumpy, even when I'm happy.
Have you seen her official picture in the cabinet room?
Yeah.
She does not look happy.
Well, you can't base your political analysis on how someone looks in a photograph, can you?
She looks unhappy.
Okay, apparently. What?
I'm just saying she looks unhappy to have got the job of Leader of the House of Commons. Remember, that was a job turned down by Sir Ian Duncan Smith.
Yes.
He explained that this morning. He didn't think he could bring anything particularly helpful to the job of, or enlightening to the job of being Leader of the House of Commons, and so has decided to stay on the back benches, where he's been talking about things like and campaigning on issues such as China. But just to go back to the original point, there's nobody within this cabinet from the Rishi Sunak.
There's one.
There is one. You're right.
One.
And go on. No.
I did that without looking at any photo. I'll tell you what. You work out who it is. I'll have a quick word with Pete in Croydon. Pete, who rattled your cage?
I don't know if anyone rattled my cage, but just I had a bit of a linguistic discussion with your researcher just now.
Yes.
I counted Liz 6 times using the phrase, I can't even remember it now, that's not good.
Something about we're going to do something immediately, I imagine, was it? We're going to take immediate action. Let me be clear, we're going to take immediate action.
And I just don't know what that means. And once I thought, OK, that doesn't make sense, when she then repeated it as if it was something she'd actually thought about.
But, OK, early spot then on a tactic. It's an evasion, isn't it? She's not answering the question. Where is the money going to come from? I think most obviously is the question. How can you be comfortable with 170 billion? We're going to take immediate action. And it also allows her to sidestep the idea that the Conservatives have been in power for 12 years, which of course they have.
Yeah, and she blamed Labour for not building any nuclear power stations.
I thought that was incredible.
But were any built in the last 12 years? I don't know, maybe some were. But
no, and one of Boris Johnson's last lies was about Gordon Brown and Tony Blair failing to sort of back any new building of power stations, and Gordon Brown did in fact publicly back new nuclear power stations. Thank you, Pete. 12:42 is the time. I've got some phone lines free. I'm not going to lie to you. The phones never ring off the hook for this. I keep telling the producer it's a waste of time, but here we are again. What did you think of PMQs? 0345 60. Maybe if I sounded more enthusiastic, would that help? Oh, blimey. I tell you what, I can't wait to find out what you thought about PMQs. Give me a bell and tell. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I mean, sometimes I think you don't ring me to tell me what you think until I've told you what I think. But Theo is here, and I don't want to dominate the microphone.
No,
with a quick quiz. Quick quiz. Theo's quiz. Theo's quiz.
Michael Ellis, the Attorney General. Michael Ellis, you'll remember, during the height of Partygate, he was a Cabinet Office Minister and would often be dispatched to the House of Commons to sort of dance on a pinhead defending the Prime Minister,
was it
Boris
him?
Johnson.
He's
a lawyer by profession.
He'll be relieved. His job gets easier now because he'll be defending the vaguely defensible as opposed to the completely indefensible.
He would. So he's in, and of course Rishi Sunak supporter. But no room at the inn for the likes of Grant Shapps, Michael Gove, as we were discussing yesterday.
You thought Shapps might get a look in, didn't you?
Well, it was obvious he wasn't going to get a look in, but you know.
My sausage slicing analogy has come true, hasn't
What's
it?
that one?
Well, the idea that, you had to pretend Brexit was a good idea in order to get into Boris Johnson's cabinet, and you also had to turn a blind eye to his obvious unsuitability. You had to be a sycophant and you had to be complicit. And Truss has reduced the pool from which she can pick. You had to be a sycophant and you had to be complicit in Boris Johnson to get into Liz Truss's cabinet, but you also couldn't have done anything to upset Liz Truss at any point in the last couple of years. So she's got an even smaller gene pool or talent pool to pick from.
So
no one that's criticised her has made the cabinet. And you said yesterday she needed to reach out and unify the party.
Yeah,
I mean, she's done the polar opposite of what Theo Usherwood advised her to do. That, in my opinion, is a fatal error.
She's not. It's just worth mentioning how much support Rishi Sunak had in the early days of the campaign. He ran. The process is broken down in the leadership contest is two phases. There's the MP phase, and then there's the membership phase. And maybe if there was a fault of Rishi Sunak's campaign, he absolutely nailed the MP phase to the point where he'd get through to the second round with the members, but they hadn't done enough groundwork with the members in terms of how they framed him as a former chancellor, what he had achieved as a chancellor, how popular he was, and the policies that he was going to adopt. So he was always playing catch-up to Liz Truss, and he came out of the starting blocks with Cameron-esque, George Osborne-esque realism when it came to the issue of the public finances. After a decade and, 12 years of belt-tightening, bringing the public finances in order, the membership just wasn't prepared to swallow anymore. And Liz Truss managed to steal a march on that, and he could never recover.
Phone's ringing off the hook now. There's no guarantee that anyone's going to have anything interesting to say. Let me make that absolutely clear. But if you're struggling to get through, do be patient. Gillian Purley says, I thought she was jolly good. Thank you, Jill. And some people didn't. That's balance, I suppose. 12:46 is the time. Here's a bit of a story, Theo. Whitehall source, and it's been double-sourced this. It's been reported in various places, from The Guardian to The Sun, that they're pulling Raab's Bill of Rights, second reading next week. Needs a radical overhaul to stop it being vulnerable to multiple amendments.
Interesting.
They're falling. What's happened between Truss and Raab? They used to write disgusting books together.
What about Rishi Sunak?
Was that it? That was it?
He was there. He was there at the launch. He was there.
Oh, I know. But will that be it? That'll be it. The only reason. There's not.
As far as, he crossed Liz Truss.
Enjoying the James and Theo show today. I do love the banter between @Mr. James OB and @Theo Usherwood, although I don't think Theo quite gets it all.
Gets it all? What do you mean?
The banter. Suggesting some of it goes over your head?
Never.
That's outrageous. 10 to 1 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I want to play you that clip again of the Conservative MP accusing a fictional character in EastEnders of being too biased, and therefore the BBC needs to be disciplined. But so many people have rung in now that I feel it would be remiss of me to do that. So I'll take some calls. Jane's in Ellesmere Port. Jane, what do you reckon?
Hi, James.
Hello, Jane.
Hiya, you're all right.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So I found Truss today. I found her very robotic. I found her very mechanical, and this might come across as a bit biased because I'm by no means a Tory voter. I've never voted Conservative, but I felt that she was very insincere. I don't think she really meant what she was saying when she was answering the questions, or more appropriately, when she wasn't. I think Starmer had a very valid point about taxes. I do think they need to increase because to grow the economy, we obviously need more money in the Treasury to invest in our public services, including education, getting people qualified.
The idea that you can cut taxes but increase public spending is certainly optimistic, to say the least. Absolutely crackerjack, to say the most.
Yeah, because we need to increase taxes to invest more in education, invest more in social care.
Or at least not decrease them, I suppose. I mean, not cut them or keep them the same.
Definitely not.
I hear you. What about Starmer? I mean, the one comedian on Twitter, an actual comedian, said something about, and I like him, he's a funny guy, Hal Cruttenden, said something along the lines of, Did Liz? I missed PMQs. Did Liz Truss leave any open goals for Keir Starmer to miss? Which I thought was quite a funny way of putting it. How do you feel?
Yeah.
Is he going to fare better or worse against Truss than he did against Johnson?
I think Starmer has got a lot more charisma, and I'm not
That's
saying
not something he's ever been accused of before.
Yeah,
Jane?
yeah. I don't think Starmer is the most charismatic of politicians, being honest, but
No.
to put the two together, he definitely comes out on top for me.
It defuses Starmer's failings by having someone on the other side of the dispatch box who's even duller. Arguably.
That's actually not a bad point, to be honest.
No.
That's actually not not a bad suggestion at all. But I do think we need somebody who has got the brains, and I think Starmer has the experience. He has the knowledge to get Labour back to government in 2024, if that's when the election is going to be.
Well, the movement is looking fairly strong on the polls. The numbers are impressive, and they get better when you replace, when you put Liz Truss's name in the mix. Labour's lead goes from, I think it's between 10 and 17, depending on what poll you're looking at, but it goes up when it is a specific question about Starmer versus Truss, as opposed to Starmer versus Johnson or Starmer versus AN Tory. Thank you, Jane. Chris is in Carlisle. Chris, what would you like to say? Hey, you got a mention in the speech, didn't you, the other day? From Kiev to Carlisle, she said.
Oh, right, yes, yeah.
What's on your mind?
I find myself ringing in, not really when I want to support anything that the Tory would do, but I have to be fair,
yeah.
and I think it was nice to get back to sort of politics rather than name calling.
I think I do as well.
I think I'm happy to let politics be a bit more boring.
Yes.
I think I counted the 6 questions. I thought that all 6 questions by Mr. Starmer were very relevant and they were good. And I think she answered perhaps 2.5 out of the 6, which is 2.5 more than we're used to doing.
The Lord of low expectations in Carlisle. You're right, though, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I also, in relation to Liz Truss and the sort of accusation or avoidance of blame for for losing Mr. Johnson. I think, having listened to Emily Maitlis yesterday in that news agent's podcast, she made a very good point. With Liz Truss has been posing in Thatcherite poses for months and months, and I'm sure that will have undermined Boris Johnson quite a lot. She was clearly preparing for her own leadership campaign for quite a long time before it happened.
I haven't listened to yesterday's episode yet, but John and Emily coming out of the blocks at full speed. You can download the News Agents podcast at Global Play and get hold of it there. I mean, I like your sort of calm optimism, the idea that actually we are seeing two grown-up. I don't know if grown-ups is quite fair. Truss is a very strange character. I don't know what she actually stands for.
I'm not optimistic, James.
No, but you are comforted by the thought that we're not going to be having ludicrous far-right sewage hurled across the House of Commons by a desperate Boris Johnson.
I think it would be very good for British politics if that started to happen and we got a bit more sensible.
I wonder if people watch what happened there and actually miss him. Think we need more far-right sewage being dredged from those hate sites and then recycled as rhetoric by a desperate Boris Johnson. I suppose some people will miss it, if you like. Thank you, Chris. Congratulations again on getting a mention in Liz Truss's acceptance speech to the whole of Carlisle, albeit that she's the only person in the country who has not picked up on how Kyiv is supposed to be pronounced these days. Adrian's in Leighton. Adrian, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello. Adrian.
I thought it was refreshing, really, that I don't have to listen to Boris Johnson, shapeshifter that he is.
Yes.
It was painful listening to PMQs with him.
If you're not doing it for a living, I can see how it would have been. When you're sitting here with Theo Usherwood, it's a slightly different dynamic. But as someone who believes in democracy and who is passing fond of the country in which we live, it was pretty awful at times, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's terrible, yeah. And can I say, it's the disgraced former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson.
Disgraced?
The disgraced former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. I've been waiting to say that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we should all start describing him as that. It's quite a segue, isn't it, from everyone being on first-name terms with him to him being the disgraced former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. He is disgraced. He left in disgrace. He is disgraceful. Thank you, mate. Before you go, I'm not a big fan of these post-PMQs chats, Adrian. I've enjoyed the contributions we've had so far, but as a general rule, what do you reckon? Should we keep it or nix it?
Oh, Christ, keep it, please. Yeah.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, really.
Everyone's a critic. I might get Theo to join in, actually. We'll handle the phones together, like a sort of Pete and Dud. Vanessa's in Wokingham. Vanessa, what do you reckon?
Oh, I don't want to be the last one.
Why not?
Praising Liz Truss, because I can't stand her or the Tory party.
Okay.
But I have to say that I was, not impressed, but I was relieved that somehow the grown-ups had come back into the room and we didn't have this, as you say, bloviating, specious liar, every other word. Mr. Speaker, hurling obscenities at him. It was quite measured. I listened to both of them. I didn't agree with her terms or what she's going forward with. I don't know how she's going to fund the whole thing.
But she's not going to make a mockery of convention, standards and tradition, is she?
Exactly.
Even if she wanted to, she doesn't have the absence of shame, I don't think. You need to do that.
And hasn't got that front as well. Well, she has got front, actually, I think, but in a different way. But also abroad, people will be watching, listening.
They won't be laughing at us today.
Exactly.
I think that's a beautiful way of putting it, actually, Vanessa.
No more laughing stock, I hope.
Let's not get carried away. Just in the context of PMQs, they're still going to be deriving a degree of amusement at our continuing nonsense regarding Brexit and our beaches. How many beaches shut today? Is it 70 beaches that have shut today because of sewage? No mention of that. And the companies responsible for this situation, Liz Truss has decided, should be perfectly permitted to keep the £170 billion in profits that they're slated to make in the very, very near future. But we will take Vanessa's thought as our closing moment today, and at least no one will be laughing at us today after that PMQs. Should we do it again tomorrow from 10? I'll be here if you are. Sheila Fogarty's next. 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 Sheila Fogarty's next.
Sự nghiệp trong người thắp sáng một niềm tin. Có một nghề đưa lớp lớp thế hệ học sinh cập bên bờ vinh quang phía trước. Có một nghề trao niềm mơ ước, chắp cánh tương lai cho đất nước mạnh giàu. Có một nghề trao